The world froze when the news broke. Richard Caldwell, a self-made billionaire with a net worth exceeding $50 billion, was dead. His private jet had plummeted into the ocean, just hours before a pivotal business deal that promised to reshape the global tech industry. Investigators rushed to label it a tragic accident, but whispers of foul play spread like wildfire. Caldwell wasn't just any billionaire, he was a titan. He built his empire from the ground up, a juggernaut that spanned luxury real estate, cutting-edge technology, and even ownership of one of the NBA's most iconic teams. Yet, it wasn't his empire that captured the headlines now. It was the revelation of a second will, one that named an unexpected heir, a boy born out of wedlock, the product of a hidden affair. Who was this child? And more importantly, what would become of the vast fortune Caldwell left behind? As the public speculated, another truth loomed in the shadows. One far darker, one that might explain not only his death but also the chaos that followed. The billionaire's demise was no accident. It was the opening move in a game of power, betrayal, and survival. And at the heart of it all lay a forbidden relationship, a boy with a dangerous legacy, and secrets that some would kill to protect. Richard Caldwell's life was a public spectacle, but his secrets remained deeply buried. Among them was his affair with Elena Torres, a jewelry designer who had neither the pedigree nor the connections of his high society peers. She was young, ambitious, and fiercely independent, a woman who captivated him from the moment they met at an exclusive art gala in Manhattan. Richard wasn't a man prone to indulgences of the heart. His world was governed by control, precision, and power. But Elena was different. She didn't cower before his wealth, nor did she try to impress him. Her confidence, paired with a sharp wit, cut through the veneer of his carefully curated life. Their affair began in secret. Late-night meetings in his penthouse, whispered phone calls, and stolen weekends in secluded resorts. To the outside world, Richard was the devoted husband of a philanthropic socialite, father to 2 accomplished children, and a paragon of American success. To Elena, he was something else entirely, a man desperate to escape the confines of his own creation. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and theirs began to fray when Elena discovered she was pregnant. "I'm keeping it," she told him, her voice steady despite the storm in her eyes. They were in his Manhattan office, the city's skyline stretching behind them. Richard's face betrayed no emotion, but his hands clenched tightly on the edge of his desk. "You don't understand what you're asking for," he said, his tone cold. "This will destroy everything." "I don't care about your everything, Richard. I care about this child. I care about my life." Richard tried to dissuade her. He offered her money, a new life far away, anything to ensure that his secret remained buried. But Elena refused. She wasn't afraid of him, nor of the power he wielded. She left that day, vowing to raise her child alone if she had to. Months passed, and Richard's resolve began to crack. He visited her in secret, watching as her modest apartment transformed with preparations for the baby. His initial anger gave way to a reluctant tenderness. When the boy, Nathan, was born, Richard's world shifted. For all his denials and schemes, he couldn't ignore the child's striking resemblance to himself. He began supporting Elena financially, ensuring that they wanted for nothing, but always from the shadows. Nathan was his blood, and though Richard would never acknowledge him publicly, he couldn't sever the bond. But Richard's duplicity came at a cost. His wife, Catherine, began noticing his frequent absences. His children, Charlotte and James, whispered among themselves about the cracks forming in their family's pristine facade. And the press, always hungry for scandal, began sniffing around his business dealings and personal life. Richard was a man cornered, caught between the life he built and the life he never expected. But as the walls closed in, he made a decision that would change everything. Days before his death, he amended his will, naming Nathan as one of his heirs. It was a decision born of guilt, of love, and perhaps of desperation. But it was also a spark that would ignite a firestorm. When Richard Caldwell's plane went down, he left behind more than a fortune. He left behind questions about his life, his choices, and the enemies who would stop at nothing to destroy his legacy. Richard Caldwell's death sent shockwaves through both his family and the corporate world, but the true earthquake came days later, when his amended will was read aloud. The room was packed with his immediate family, lawyers, and a few trusted executives. Catherine Caldwell sat poised and icy, flanked by her children, Charlotte and James. None of them were prepared for what came next. In addition to his recognized heirs, Mr. Caldwell has named Nathan Torres as a beneficiary to his estate's silence. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Catherine's face darkened, her controlled demeanor cracking under the weight of this betrayal. Charlotte let out a sharp gasp, and James leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "Who the hell is Nathan Torres?" Catherine finally demanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The answer came not from the lawyers, but from a tabloid headline that appeared the next day. "Billionaire's secret son exposed, the child he kept hidden." The media frenzy was relentless. Reporters camped outside Elena's modest home, cameras flashing as she shielded her son from the chaos. Nathan, now 7 years old, clung to his mother, bewildered by the sudden attention. Elena had spent years protecting her son, teaching him to live a quiet life far removed from his father's world. But now, the world knew. Nathan wasn't just another child, he was the potential heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune, and everyone wanted a piece of the story. Richard's decision to include Nathan in his will wasn't just shocking, it was dangerous. The Caldwell family's lawyers moved swiftly, filing a suit to challenge the will's validity. They claimed that Richard had been manipulated, that Nathan was not his biological son, and that Elena was a con artist who had preyed on a vulnerable man. The public devoured the drama. Was Nathan truly Richard's son? Was Elena a cunning gold digger, or a mother fighting for her child's rightful place in the world? Elena refused to stay silent. In a televised interview, she held Nathan close, her voice trembling but resolute. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "All I ever wanted was for my son to have the chance to know his father, to be loved and recognized. Now, we're being treated like criminals for simply existing." The interview only fueled the flames. Catherine Caldwell doubled down, hiring the best lawyers money could buy to discredit Elena and her son. DNA tests were ordered, their results becoming the most anticipated revelation since Richard's death. When the results finally came in, the truth was undeniable. Nathan was Richard Caldwell's biological son. But the battle was far from over. The courtroom was a circus. Cameras flashed as Catherine and her children arrived, impeccably dressed and radiating indignation. Elena, by contrast, looked worn but determined, holding Nathan's hand as they entered through a side door to avoid the media frenzy. Catherine's legal team came out swinging. They painted Elena as a manipulative opportunist who had seduced Richard for financial gain. They argued that Nathan's inclusion in the will was an impulsive decision, made under emotional duress. Elena Torres was never part of Richard Caldwell's world, Catherine's lead attorney declared. She has no business claiming a share of his empire, and neither does her child. But Elena's lawyers were prepared. They presented evidence of Richard's financial support for Nathan over the years, monthly deposits, handwritten notes, and even photographs of the billionaire visiting his son in secret. They argued that Richard's will was a deliberate acknowledgement of his responsibilities, a final attempt to set things right. The media turned the trial into a spectacle, dissecting every argument, every piece of evidence, every facial expression. Public opinion was divided. Some saw Catherine as a grieving widow defending her family's legacy. Others viewed her as a ruthless woman trying to erase an inconvenient truth. As the trial dragged on, new revelations emerged. An employee from Richard's private security detail testified that Richard had confided in him about Nathan. "He told me he regretted not being there for his son," the man said. "He wanted to make amends." The testimony was a turning point. It humanized Richard in a way that no lawyer could have orchestrated, shifting the narrative from one of betrayal to one of redemption. But Catherine wasn't ready to concede. She instructed her lawyers to dig deeper, and what they uncovered added another layer of intrigue, a draft of a previous will that made no mention of Nathan. Richard Caldwell changed his mind at the last minute, Catherine's lawyer argued. This was not a well-thought-out decision, it was a mistake. Elena's team countered with a bombshell of their own. They revealed a letter Richard had written to Nathan, discovered among his personal effects. The letter, dated just weeks before his death, expressed his love for the boy and his hopes for their future. "My son," the letter read. "I've made mistakes, but you are not one of them. You deserve the world, and I promise to give it to you, even if I'm not here to see it." The letter was a devastating blow to Catherine's case. It wasn't just evidence, it was Richard's voice, speaking from beyond the grave. Yet, the trial's most shocking moment was still to come. Midway through proceedings, Elena received a warning. A cryptic message slipped under her apartment door. It read, "Stop fighting, or you'll regret it." Elena was no stranger to threats. Ever since Nathan's existence was revealed, she had received anonymous calls and messages, some begging her to drop the case, others more sinister. But this was different. It was personal. She brought the note to her lawyer, who advised her to stay silent for the sake of the case. But Elena couldn't ignore the growing sense of danger. She began to wonder if Richard's death was more than an accident, if someone wanted Nathan out of the picture for reasons far beyond inheritance. As the trial neared its conclusion, the stakes grew higher. Catherine's team pushed for a settlement, offering Elena a significant sum in exchange for relinquishing Nathan's claim to the Caldwell estate. It was a tempting offer, enough money to secure Nathan's future without the constant scrutiny and threats. But Elena refused. "This isn't about money," she told her lawyer. "This is about my son's place in the world. His father wanted him to be recognized, and I won't let anyone take that away from him." The decision set the stage for a final showdown in court, one that would determine not only Nathan's future but also the legacy of Richard Caldwell himself. Elena's refusal to settle sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. The Caldwell family's legal team regrouped, but there was a shift in the atmosphere, one that Elena couldn't ignore. The warnings had stopped being subtle. It began with strange men loitering outside her building, their eyes cold and unyielding when she passed. Nathan's school called to report a man asking for him, claiming to be a relative. Elena's lawyer, Charles Bennett, grew concerned as well. "This isn't just about the will anymore," he said grimly. "Someone wants you out of the way." The name Marcus Kane surfaced soon after. Kane, a rival of Richard Caldwell, had spent years locked in bitter disputes with him over business deals, patents, and market dominance. Richard's death was a windfall for Kane. His largest competitor was gone, leaving a void Kane was all too eager to fill. Charles dug deeper, uncovering whispers of corruption, illegal trades, and connections to dangerous people. Kane wasn't just an opportunist. He was a man willing to eliminate threats by any means necessary. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Kane's influence reached farther than anyone realized. When Richard's private correspondence was subpoenaed, Charles discovered fragments of an unfinished report. Richard had been investigating Kane before his death. The details were sparse but damning. Offshore accounts, bribery scandals, and allegations of sabotage. "This is why they're after you," Charles told Elena, spreading the documents across the table. "Richard must have been close to exposing him. And now, they think you have whatever he was planning to use." Elena's stomach turned. She thought of Nathan, so small and unaware of the danger surrounding them. She thought of the letter Richard had written, his attempt to make amends before it was too late. But it wasn't just her and Nathan anymore. Someone else was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was past midnight when Elena awoke to the sound of glass shattering. She bolted upright, her heart pounding as Nathan stirred in the next room. For a moment, she thought it was a dream, until the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Grabbing Nathan, she slipped out the back door just as a shadowy figure entered the apartment. Her instincts screamed at her to run, and she didn't look back. The safe house provided by Charles was a modest cabin on the outskirts of the city. But even there, Elena felt exposed. The man who broke into her apartment hadn't been a common thief. He was searching for something, and Elena knew what it was. The unfinished report Richard had hidden somewhere before his death. The following days were a blur of paranoia and preparation. Charles arranged for private security, but even they couldn't guarantee safety. "You can't stay here forever," he warned. "We need to find out what they're after, and fast." Elena took to searching through Richard's old belongings, now locked in storage under legal protection. Among the piles of documents, she found a small, unmarked envelope tucked into a hollowed-out book. Inside was a key and a cryptic note in Richard's handwriting. "Trust no one. The truth is where it began." Charles studied the note with a frown. Where it began? He must mean his first office. Before the empire, before everything. The office was a nondescript building in a forgotten part of the city. Elena and Charles went at night, avoiding the main roads. The air inside was stale, the furniture covered in dust, but the place was untouched. In the corner, hidden beneath a false floorboard, they found a metal box. Inside was a hard drive, encrypted and labeled simply with Kane's name. Charles' expression darkened. "This is it," he said. "This is what they're willing to kill for." But the moment of triumph was short-lived. As they left the office, headlights appeared down the street. A black SUV barreled toward them, and Charles shoved Elena and Nathan into his car. "Hold on," he shouted as the engine roared to life. The chase was relentless. Streets blurred together as the SUV closed the distance. Elena held Nathan tightly, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. Charles swerved into an alley, the tires screeching as he narrowly avoided a collision. They reached a crowded intersection, and Charles used the chaos to lose their pursuers. By the time they pulled into another safe house, a small, reinforced apartment owned by one of Charles' allies, they were shaken but unharmed. "This can't go on," Charles said, pacing the room. "We have to take this public. The hard drive is evidence. If we can expose Kane, we might have a chance to end this." Elena hesitated. She thought of the reporters, the cameras, the questions. She thought of Nathan, who had already endured so much. But she also thought of Richard, the man who had tried to protect them even as his world fell apart. "We'll do it," she said finally. "But only if we make sure Nathan is safe first." Charles nodded. "Then let's finish this." The hard drive was a Pandora's box. Its contents painted Marcus Kane as a ruthless manipulator, using bribery, extortion, and even sabotage to eliminate competition. Among the files were emails implicating him in the orchestrated collapse of smaller tech firms and offshore bank transfers linked to shell companies. But it was one folder, titled Caldwell, that made Elena's blood run cold. The folder contained flight logs, schematics, and encrypted messages. Pieces of a puzzle suggesting that the plane crash wasn't an accident. It was planned. Elena turned to Charles, her voice trembling. "This proves Kane killed Richard." Charles leaned over the files, his expression hardening. "It's not enough. We need the encryption key to unlock the rest of these files. Without it, Kane can argue it's fabricated or incomplete." Elena remembered the cryptic note Richard had left. "The truth is where it began. If the key wasn't in the office, where else could it be?" Her thoughts drifted to Richard's personal letters, kept in a private vault she hadn't accessed since his death. The next day, under the pretense of retrieving personal belongings, Elena entered the bank where the vault was secured. Inside the metal box, she found bundles of handwritten letters from Richard. Many were addressed to Nathan, filled with apologies and words of love. But one letter stood out. It wasn't addressed to Nathan or her, it was marked simply, "To the one who finds this." The letter was brief but haunting. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it. You have the power to end this. Trust only Charles, and don't stop until the truth is known. The key is in the watch." Elena gasped, her hand trembling as she pulled out the old watch Richard had given Nathan years ago. She had assumed it was a sentimental gift, but now it took on new meaning. Back at the safe house, Charles carefully dismantled the watch, revealing a tiny USB drive hidden inside. Plugging it into his laptop, they watched as the final files unlocked. The evidence was damning. Direct orders from Kane to sabotage Richard's jet and emails detailing the cover-up. "We have him," Charles said, but his voice was grim. "This isn't just about exposing him. Kane won't go down quietly. He'll try to take us out first." Elena felt the weight of his words but looked at Nathan, who was playing quietly in the corner. "Then we fight," she said. "For Nathan. For Richard." Charles wasted no time contacting trusted reporters, arranging a press conference to reveal the files. Meanwhile, Elena and Nathan were moved to a secure location, but the tension was suffocating. The more they exposed, the more dangerous it became. Days before the press conference, Elena received another threat. A package was delivered to her hiding place, containing a photograph of Nathan at school, circled in red ink. The message was clear. "Back off, or he's next." Charles wanted to call off the press conference, but Elena refused. "We've come too far," she said. "Kane is desperate. That means we're winning." The day of the press conference arrived, and the room was packed with journalists. Charles took the podium, his voice steady as he outlined the evidence. He presented the flight logs, the financial records, and finally, the emails ordering Richard's assassination. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and the public began to realize the extent of Kane's corruption. But as the press conference ended, chaos erupted. A fire alarm blared, and smoke began to fill the building. Security rushed to evacuate the room, but it wasn't an accident, it was an attack. Elena clutched Nathan as Charles guided them through the crowd. A figure emerged from the smoke, gun in hand, but before he could fire, one of Charles's security guards tackled him to the ground. Outside, police swarmed the area, arresting the gunman and dispersing the crowd. It was clear now, Kane wasn't just trying to silence them, he was ready to kill. That night, Kane's arrest was announced. The evidence from the hard drive, combined with the gunman's confession, left no room for doubt. Kane was charged with murder, conspiracy, and a litany of financial crimes. But the victory was bittersweet. Elena held Nathan tightly, realizing the cost of exposing the truth. Richard's legacy was safe, but their lives would never be the same. As she watched the news coverage of Kane's downfall, she felt a pang of sadness. Richard had given everything to protect them, even his life. Now, it was her turn to honor his sacrifice and ensure Nathan grew up knowing the strength of his father's love. The dust had finally settled. Marcus Kane, the man who orchestrated Richard Caldwell's murder and threatened Elena and Nathan's lives, now faced a lengthy prison sentence. His empire crumbled overnight as the evidence against him flooded the media. Shareholders abandoned him, his allies turned their backs, and his name became synonymous with greed and corruption. For Elena, it was a bittersweet victory. She had won the battle for justice, but the scars of the fight lingered. Nathan, though too young to fully understand the events, had grown quieter, more reserved. The ordeal had robbed him of a piece of his innocence. In the weeks following Kane's arrest, Eleanor received a flood of support from strangers around the world. Letters poured in, commending her bravery, her determination to stand up for her son and Richard's legacy. Yet there were moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if the price of truth had been too high. Richard's name was restored, not just as a businessman but as a father who had fought to do what was right in the end. His last letter to Nathan was made public during a televised interview with Eleanor, touching the hearts of millions. In it, Richard had written, "Nathan, my greatest regret is not being there for you from the start. But know this. Everything I've done, every decision I've made, was to give you a life free from the shadows of my mistakes. Be brave, my son, and never let the world dim your light." The letter became a symbol of redemption, a reminder that even in his flaws, Richard had sought to protect what truly mattered. As this chapter closes, we ask you, the audience, what would you do if you were in Elena's position? Would you fight for the truth, even when the stakes were life and death? If you were Nathan, how would you carry the legacy of a father who sacrificed everything to protect you? This story isn't just about wealth, power, or betrayal. It's about courage, resilience, and the lengths we go to for those we love. What's your take? How did this story resonate with you? If you were to rate this journey, how many stars would you give it? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your perspective. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us craft stories that captivate and inspire. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps us going, and we can't wait to bring you more gripping tales of love, loss, and triumph. Thank you for being part of this journey. We wish you a day filled with inspiration and a future brimming with possibilities. Stay safe, and until next time, may your courage light the way.